Back on the show is the champ, the BFL champ. It's Chris Bukwas Anderson, who's going to be taking on Matt Dwyer coming up here at BFL 52 on November 18th. Chris, what's going on? How are you?
Good, man. Thanks for having me back.
No problem. Glad to have you back. And, of course, you got this big fight against Matt Dwyer, like I mentioned off the top, a former UFC fighter. But before we talk about that, I want to talk about your last fight. For those who didn't see it, it ended with an injury. What exactly happened in the fight against you and Jared Raval?
Do you want to, like, the whole fight or just...
just kind of the close notes for people who might have not seen the fight and sort of what happened in it.
Okay, so it started off on the feet, like, in my favor. He caught me once, kind of wobbled me. But I was hitting him good along the cage with some right body, left hooks. And it kept landing over and over again, and it was kind of rocking him. But we ended up in a position, and he grabbed onto a Kimura, and he eventually got me down. And he's a black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, one of the top guys in Canada. So at that point, like, I was in some big trouble. He flipped me over, was working for an armbar, and then was working towards getting the back. So I tried to get into his guard. He ended up grabbing a triangle and sinking it in fully. And he still had my arm, and he was going back and forth, triangle arm, and I eventually got out with, because I power bombed him, like a Rampage Jackson kind of thing. I picked him up, and when we landed, I think my elbow landed on his head, because like the answer in the phone, and that cut him open really, really bad right here, and so he went for the mount. I ended up slipping out and back on the feet. I started, same thing, that body shot, left hook, and then some elbows started flying. And at the end of the round, I got him down, and he was bleeding, like, everywhere. The side of his head was cut, the forehead there, like I mentioned. His nose was crushed, and I was getting some ground and pound and just slicing through his guard. The bell went, and the doctor had to stop it because the one on his forehead was really opened. It was more like a hole than a cut, and anyway, they couldn't get the bleeding to stop, and doctor had to call it.
Well, there you go, and of course you kept your undefeated record intact, and now you're fighting Matt Dwyer. How did this all come together with you fighting Matt? Because this is a pretty big fight for you.
Well, it's been brought up before, and I just didn't feel like I was ready for that fight. I think it was like when I was 3-0 or something. It was the first time someone brought it up, and I was like, I'm just not ready at this point, because at that time, he had 4 UFC fights, maybe 9 professional fights outside of the UFC. So yeah, I didn't feel ready at that point, and now I think's the time, because I cleared out the welterweight division, and I earned myself a middleweight shot and beat one of the better middleweights in the country. So this is the next step, and if I can beat Dwyer, then that shows that I'm ready to go to that next level, right? Because Dwyer, you remember Dwyer had some good fights in the UFC, and he went to decision with Alan Jouban, who's doing pretty. He's like just outside top 10, or he's like
he
top
is
10,
yeah
right?
yeah Jouban's kind of he's one of those. He's been a little inconsistent lately, but he's definitely a guy that people are know in that division, because he's he puts on some great fights as well. So yeah, you're right. Matt Matt had kind of a weird run, but he but people will always remember Matt's tenure in the UFC, because he always put on exciting fights.
Yeah, man. Well, that's just how close it is. Like those 2 decisions, he easily could have won. Had he got 1 or 2 better exchanges. Like, they're pretty close matches, and that's just how it goes, right?
Yeah, no, I agree with that. Now, how do you feel like you match up against him in this matchup?
I think fairly well. Like, I think we're both really well rounded. We're kind of similar in the sense that we use volume and a high pace and good ground and pound. Good on the feet. We're both pretty tall. I don't think either guy's going to have much of a reach advantage. So I think it matches pretty well, and I think it'll be a good matchup.
Yeah, I agree with that. Now, the one thing I look at in this fight is that he hasn't fought in a while. I mean, July 2016 was the last time he competed. Do you feel like that's going to impact him in this fight at all, just not being as active?
It could. I think so. Some guys it doesn't bother them. I think it depends where he's at mentally. Now if he underestimated me, then I think that'll definitely play into it. Um, you know, but mm, he's been around for a while, so I don't think it'll make too big of a deal.
And how's training camp going? And who are some of your main training partners that you've been working with ahead of this fight?
Um, Training's been going good, and I'm just doing the regular thing. I'm down at Bill Fraser's gym working on the jiu-jitsu, and I'm up at Knockout Muay Thai with Scott Judson working on my Muay Thai.
Excellent. Keeping things at business as usual. I like that. How about the weight cut? Because I know this is a middleweight fight. Matt's normally fought at welterweight. You have as well. How's the cut going? Getting down to 85 must be a lot easier.
Oh, for sure, yeah. I'm still going to be at the maximum of the 8% or whatever it is, right? Battlefield. But yeah, it's easy. I basically like I'm training just as hard as I would, but I get to eat as much as I want, and I don't have to stress and jump on the scale every 20 minutes. So good.
How do you see this fight ending on November 18th?
I don't usually like to make predictions, but you know what? I think it's going to end in a knockout or a TKO. I'm not too sure which one of us, but probably in round 2.
I like it. Is this the fight that gets you in the UFC? I mean, if you look at past UFC signees, it's usually someone that's defeated a notable veteran. Do you feel like this is the one that's going to get you there?
No guarantees, but I mean, I think it should, right? It should be a good transition. Like some of the other Battlefield fighters had about 8, 9 fights. I'll be at 7, but I did capture 2 belts, and if I put away a UFC bet, then I think I should be right there. But you never know. We'll see when I get the call.
You doing anything for Halloween? I should mention we're recording on the 31st. Are you doing anything, dressing up at all?
You know what? I might throw on the old Spidey mask, but I gotta do some training today.
Okay, fair enough. I like that. What about you watching any TV right now at all? In between sessions and training and everything.
No, not a lot of time for TV, man. You know what? I watch highlight videos and instructionals, like online in between training sessions to try to find different things to experiment with during live rolling and stuff like that. So like in between training, I got that, and I got a new puppy, and so there's lots of stuff to do in between training. So I don't really got a lot of time for shows. But you know what? I do watch Dragon Ball Z.
Well, there you go. That's a great show. There you go. A lot of fighters watch that. A lot of the anime stuff, and it's because there's a lot of fighting in that, right? Like I'm sure you can kind of take something away from that. Just was kind of
yeah. You know what? It's the only show where the good guys got to actually train. Like these guys train and push themselves, and they're always reaching new limits. And I think like sometimes there's a lot of like philosophy about like martial arts, and it seems like the writer might have had a little bit of knowledge of martial arts.
I'd say so too. Everyone's got to check out this fight. It's BFL 52 coming up here November 18th. Chris, always a pleasure. Always appreciate you joining me here. Just remind people where they can get a hold of you on social media, and if you got any sponsors or shout outs, the floor is yours.
So I'm on Twitter at Bukwas Anderson. I'm on Instagram _Bukwas, and Facebook Chris Bukwas. That's Bukwas.